You're listening to World of Empowerment Radio, your station for practical spirituality in a changing world. And here are your hosts, Aingeal Rose and Ahonu.
You are very welcome. I am Ahonu, and unfortunately my lovely Aingeal Rose is not with us today, but she's very keen on this subject that we're going to talk about with our special guest, Paula Forget. Now, before we get into it, I just want to position this for everybody because Paula presents quite an astonishing premise, and that is, what if you lived 300 years? And she's written a book called What If You Live 300 Years? How to Live with Resilience in Changing Times. And she presents a point of view that's developed after exploring the outlook of centenarians, of how to live with resilience in changing times. And boys and girls, aren't we in changing times? It promotes an attitude of optimism, of curiosity, and of wonder. So join with us because I feel we're going to enter into new possibilities here. We're going to go along some scientific routes as well as practical and spiritual routes. So let me give a big warm welcome to the World of Empowerment podcast to Paula Forget. Paula, you're very welcome indeed. So tell us, what on earth possessed you in the first place to even think of the possibility of living for 300 years? Tell us.
Well, thank you for having me on today, and I'm excited to talk about it. So I've had this attitude I developed in my 20s, and I used to like to read a lot. And so I was at the library and I saw some books about centenarians. And so I was kind of curious, I wonder what they think about the world, now that they've lived for a while. And so I read it and I thought, well, that was interesting. They obviously, I'm older now, but back then they would have been born probably in the late 1800s. And so at that time, most of those people that were 100, they were raised on a farm and
Right.
They lived on farms. So they worked really hard and they had a lot of discipline, a lot of structure in their life. And then eventually their life changed. They might have ended up moving to cities and getting new jobs and things like that. And a lot of changes happened. And so when they got older, they just kept on being busy. And they had friends and they socialized and they went out there in the world and did things. And they just tried to keep their interests into what was going on. And the funniest thing was that nobody could tell them about what to do with their health because they had outlived everybody they knew.
Right. Yeah.
So anyways, I was thinking about all that. And so I started thinking, well, what if I lived to be 100? So I could kind of think about, well, I can kind of imagine a world maybe in 100 or, 100 years. And then I thought, well, what if I lived to, and I don't know why I went there. So I thought, now what if I lived to be 200? And I could still kind of imagine maybe something. But then I thought, well, what if I lived 300 years? And I thought, boy, that would be a really long time.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine what that would be like. But then I started thinking, well, in 300 years, gosh, I probably want to live in more than one place. It's a big world out there. I don't just want to stay stuck in one place. And I probably want to do more than one job, like have more than one career.
That's interesting.
Because, who wants to do the same job for 300 years? I couldn't.
Yeah.
And then I thought, if, for instance, habits we have, like if somebody did something mean to you, you wouldn't want to hold a grudge for 300 years. That'd be stupid.
Paula, you're touching on some really empowering thoughts here. And I can see how you got inspired to ask questions about living longer and longer and longer from the way you explained it. But one of the things that I'm impressed with is how early on you got out of the boxed in way of thinking. You know how we're led to believe. My mother used to always say, when I asked her questions about anything, whether it was religion or politics, and she'd say, this is what we're led to believe, right? And I remember as a young boy saying, well, I don't want to believe what we're led to believe anymore, because I believe that there are other possibilities out there. Now, I never asked the questions like you asked about what if we lived to 200 years or 300 years? And I can see how it would be inspiring. I mean, I'm going along with you right now and I'm thinking to myself, 200 years, wow, yeah, 300 years, wow. And even beyond, because I think what it does is it opens up our inherent power of who we really are. That's what I feel those kinds of questions are doing.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, it changes your whole outlook. Like
Yeah,
instead of thinking, well, I'm going to grow up, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to get a degree, then I'm going to get this career, and then I'm going to get married, and I'm going to have children, I'm going to buy a house, and then I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to pay that house off and all this stuff in it. And then
yes,
I'm going to retire, and then I'm going to die. Or no, then maybe I'll do my bucket list, and then
right.
I'll die. Well, I didn't want to wait till down there to do my bucket list. I thought, well, why don't I just do what I want to do now? Like, why don't I just follow my bliss and start doing the things that I enjoy?
Wow. And you know, like I said, it opens up all kinds of potential, because as I'm thinking along with you now, I'm saying to myself, yeah, I'd like to live in Hawaii. I'd like to go to the Seychelles. I'd like to, spend time in India and so on. And whereas up until now, I think what we are led to believe is, oh, it's time to retire. It's time to bunker down. It's time to, do nothing. Where in fact you're saying it's time to do everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still doing stuff. I've had a lot of different careers, and now I'm working for a nonprofit here in Bellingham, Washington, and we're getting ready to open up a library, and
Yeah.
it's called the Seeker's Library, which is full of interesting spiritual books, things about helping us become all that we can be.
Wow. Is that a private library or is it a public
It
library?
is. It's going to open up in September.
Oh,
We're
that's
going to have, uh, by then we'll have about 6,000 books.
and no doubt your book will be amongst them.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. So tell us about how your book developed then. I mean, you said this started when you were young and you were exploring the possibilities. Were you like journaling as you went along, or were you taking notes, or did it all come flooding to you recently?
Well, actually, it was during COVID. I was bored and I was thinking, I can't really go anywhere or do much. And I'd been teaching stained glass and teaching classes and meditation. And I couldn't get all these groups of people together in one room. And I was kind of frustrated, kind of like, well, what can I do? And so I started, and I don't know why, I just started thinking, well, what if I wrote my book about that, about my 300-year attitude, and so I just started playing with that and throwing down ideas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And and so I ended up writing it during that time period.
So maybe there was a good thing came out of the COVID scenario.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So how did you find yourself structuring it? Now, the only reason I'm asking you this question is because I don't know if you know or not, but Aingeal Rose and I are publishers, and we've published over 1,000 books. And in the last good few years, we've focused more on personal power and self-help and development and growth of consciousness and awareness, all those kinds of things. So how did you structure it? Like, did you go back to your childhood when you were thinking about what you were going to write about, or how did you begin?
The way I wrote it was, I'm really organized.
Right.
And so I just started from the beginning, and I started thinking about, I guess I've had a little, I don't know if it's that unusual, but I was adopted, for instance. And so I thought, I should probably mention that because, when we're really young, we don't really have any control over our life. And then when we start getting older, then we start making our own choices. And then as we get more and more freedom and become adults, then we have all the freedom to do
Right.
whatever we want. So I just started writing down what had happened to me, but I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted it to be about the lessons that I got along the way.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So it's not a memoir then, as such.
No.
It's practical advice, I guess you could call it, is it? Or it's sharing your exploration into these ideas.
Well, actually, it's a course book because I was thinking, I could use this and teach a class because at the end of every chapter, there's usually maybe 3 questions like to think about, and they're good discussion questions about
Yeah.
that particular chapter, and it makes people think. Like everybody's going to look at things their own way, and is going to have their own experience to share
Yes.
about it.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea when you talk about turning it into a course, because I feel that there would be a number of people who would find that very, very empowering. Because, like I say, we're conditioned and led to believe that come 70 years or 80 years or 90 years, I'm done, you know. And as we know, that is not necessarily the case. So your attitude is absolutely wonderful. So in terms of fear, right? And I'm asking this because I know we get that question asked of us a lot. I'm afraid of the future. I'm afraid of World War III. I'm afraid of what our politicians are doing. I'm afraid of the direction technology is going. How did you work that into deciding to live 300 years? Do you understand
Well,
my?
there's
Yeah.
yes, there's a couple of elements about that, and I know I was going to write a chapter about fear, and I know that a lot of people, most people are really afraid of, of what's going on, and they don't like change in their life,
Right.
and they like to control and hang on to everything. And so to me, there are 2 parts to that because I really don't fit into any of that. And like for me, I like variety and I like change. And one of the um, phrases I always use is, I'm really comfortable with change, living in a high degree of uncertainty.
Wow.
And everybody goes like, oh.
Yeah.
But because I find that life is really an adventure. And I really believe that. Like when I was younger, I read Norman Vincent Peale's The Power of Positive Thinking.
Yes, I remember that.
And and for that time period, it was kind of an inspiring book. And so what I would do is I would think of something that I wanted, and I'd imagine that I'm throwing a boomerang out there in the world, and I expect it to come back with something.
Yeah.
So when I would leave the house, I would just go out into the world and expect to find whatever it is that I wanted. And so that kind of developed in me that feeling of adventure and curiosity that, oh, I'm going to find this whatever.
Mm.
And it would happen. And the only time it didn't happen is probably when I really shouldn't have asked for that. But sometimes I asked for things and got them, and I might have regretted it. So there's a lesson in there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
But
then later on,
would that
with it,
stop you from asking again now?
yeah,
Yeah.
no, no, because then there was like a second part to this, is that when I was 40, I started meditating, and for some reason, it was really easy for me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, I I had guides that showed up, and they started taking me to other realms and all this stuff. And so then I'd had something kind of like a near-death experience early on in my life. So I knew that, I didn't have to worry about death. And so because of that, it never stopped me from doing anything. And I don't know if maybe that's the main reason that I'm not afraid. I'm really not afraid of anything. Now I know that bad things happen to people, and some things bad things might happen to me or have.
Yeah.
But it's something I just deal with. It's not something I'm afraid of.
Well, I'm glad you raised that, because one of the questions we get asked a lot too is, why do we have to learn through adversity? And I know from my own situation, my own life, my first baby died on my birthday when he was 4 months old. And that's what started me on a spiritual path, because I started asking questions. Why? Indeed, I wrote a book, Why Did He Die? Because I wanted to know, like, what was death, and why were we so afraid of it, and what was beyond death, and all those kinds of questions. But I feel that had he not died, I would never have asked those kinds of questions. Do you know what I'm saying? Now, Aingeal Rose also has several stories like that she tells, where she was just married to her first husband 3 months into their married life, and he was murdered. He was shot in the heart, and that's what got her on a spiritual path too, because she began asking those same questions. She went to her first psychic, as she says, and asked those kinds of questions, like, why did he die? What's the reason for it all? Why did I attract this circumstance into my life? And so, to answer that question, do we have to learn through adversity? I hear you saying not necessarily, but not to be afraid of the adversity either.
I thought of another reason that I have the attitude I have is when I was about 12 years old, I was always really sensitive. I always used to complain to myself, why do I have to be so sensitive? And I feel everything. It's like, ah. And anyways, my family, they were going through some tough times, and there was a lot of fighting going on, and, nothing that, it's just old grown up stuff.
Yeah.
And they got through it. But they always wanted me, because I was adopted, they always wanted me. My mother always wanted me to be smiling and look like I'm happy and all this stuff. And I would bottle up all my sad feelings for later in the day, like at night when I'm by myself. And one night, which is not a good idea. So one night I took a bottle of aspirin, because I was only like 12 or something. And I drank a bottle of aspirin thinking it might kill me.
Wow.
And then right after I did that, I realized that I realized that, gosh, that's the stupidest thing I have ever done.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, I decided that I would take responsibility for my feelings, that it wouldn't be dependent on other people or situations, like people, places, and things.
Yes.
It would all be because I am responsible for my feelings and how I'm going to react to things. I am responsible. I decide that I'm going to have a good day. I decide everything about myself. Every decision I make is mine. And to do that at the age of 12 is huge.
Yes, indeed it is.
I think that was probably a big factor in it.
Yeah, yeah. Now,
and I was fine. The aspirin didn't kill me. I didn't go to the hospital. Nothing happened.
That's what I was about to ask you. I mean, how did you come out of that with you're still here?
Yeah, it didn't do anything.
Yeah. Wow. So that's also about like a fear of the future, in a sense. That's what you were considering. So what advice would you give to people now, like in the world we're in today, in terms of fear of the future? no matter what it is, like I say, whether it's political or whether it's hunger or sociological or whatever form it takes. Do you suggest that people focus on living to be 300 and in that way see themselves not dying in the near future because of their fear?
No, nobody's going to live to be 300. It's
Right.
just an attitude. It's an attitude.
An
Yeah.
attitude. Okay. But what I feel it does, though, is remove that fear of death, though. That's what I feel it does.
Yeah, I don't know. I tend to, like, if I have things coming up in my life and there's a lot of unknown and maybe scary stuff, I just take it one day at a time or one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Because if you try to think of everything all at once and all the possibilities and all the, I have this little hand puppet, and it's my ego. And it'll start talking and saying, well, this is what you should be doing, and this is what you should be doing, and this and that, and what if this happens? Oh my God, what are we going to do? It's like, no. So I just kind of take everything one thing at a time, one step at a time. Like, I'm aware of everything,
Yes.
but I don't get attached to it.
Right. Yeah. And would you suggest, Paula, that somebody, in considering what we're talking about today and considering the book that you've written, would you suggest that somebody takes it step by step, like you said, one day at a time? In other words, consider living to be 90, 100, 120, like in increments like that? Or would you go all the way out and say, I'm going to live to be 300?
No, I don't think about how long I'm going to live. I really don't look at it that way. To me, it's still just an attitude that if I have some big problem in front of me, I just figure I'll get over that, and then I'll just go on, because if I live to be 300, it probably won't be the last big problem I'll have.
Right. Yeah. But I'm trying I'm trying to understand how somebody might ingest that attitude, how they might foster that attitude. In other words, do they consider, I'm going to live to be 100, or I'm going to live to be 200, or I'm going to live to be 300? Do you understand what I'm trying to understand? I'm trying to understand, do you just go straight into considering, like, I'm going to live for 3, 4, 500 years right off the bat, or do you do it in increments? Do you understand?
No, it's more just kind of like, if I lived a really, really long time, I wouldn't make such a big deal of these little things.
Right. Yes.
That's all. Like, if you get rid of the 300 years and just say, what if I lived a really, really long time?
Yeah.
Then these things would just pass.
Right. So it fosters that attitude, and that's what the core of what it is that you're writing about and what you're teaching.
Yeah. So you have to be resilient, know that it's probably not the last time. It's not the last time I might get a flat tire.
Yes. Now tell me this. You know how there are many teachings out there that say that we create our future, right? So if somebody, and I know I was guilty of this, because, like I said, this is what we are led to believe. And in my case, it was that you live to be 70, 80. My mother was 94 when she died. So to me, in my mind, that's an ingrained kind of an expectation, right? That I may manifest because I believe it. Now, do you think, Paula, that by expecting to live longer, whatever length of time it is, that we will live longer?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I mean, I really believe that. Like, if everybody lived to be 150, then we wouldn't be limiting ourselves at 85, because we would know that, most people get to live 150 years. So, I think that our attitude has a lot to do with our longevity too.
That's interesting. So that, in a way, proves that we do manifest those kinds of outcomes when we sincerely believe them.
Yeah. Oh, we'll find out.
Yeah, yeah. And are there any, like, aside from that attitude, do you feel the necessity to incorporate any kind of techniques, like other techniques, or even diet that might extend our lives?
Well, obviously, well, diet is really important. So,
Yeah. But what I'm trying to get at is, do you, like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? In other words, do you decide, right, I'm going to live a really long time, and then the ability to be able to do that by way of eating the good food and exercise or whatever might need would follow naturally? Or would it be the case that, hey, I'm going to start working out and I'm going to start eating fresh fruit or whatever so that I can live to be a really long time?
I think about it more like, because I do have a really good diet, but I eat that way because it makes me feel good.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I don't think of, like, since I'm not afraid of the future,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think about how long I'm going to live. I really don't. I don't have that fear that, oh, I have to do these things if I want to live longer, like a lot of people do, like, do
Yes,
you know what you're doing there? That's not good for you. And that's not, I just do it because I notice how it makes me feel.
right.
And so I want to eat healthy because I feel good. I feel good when I do.
Yeah. Now, what I'm hearing from you then is that it's like, when I said which comes first, the chicken or the egg, I feel that the attitude that you have adopted is what then leads to everything else, your life and the way you live it and what you
Yeah.
expect and all of that. Yeah. And do you think that the choices that we make then, Paula, as a result of that attitude, would naturally fit in to this new expectation, let's call it?
Oh, yeah. Because, along with, like, there's always going to be change.
Yeah.
And so if you're working a particular career and you're really vested into it, and then something changes, there used to was a book a long time ago that was written like Who Moved My Cheese?
Mm.
And it was a corporate book, but anyways, it's about these people that work in an office and they do everything one way. And then all of a sudden they find out that everything's been changed and now they have to do it another way. It's kind of,
Yeah.
so I think that's kind of expected. I've had different careers that have ended because of that.
Yeah.
And so, if when that happens, then you just adjust, you find something else. And
Mhm.
a lot of skills translate into other things.
So, in the long life that you now are creating, will there be more books?
Yeah, actually, um, when I moved here to Washington State to publish my first book, which was Guided to the Higher Realms, about meditation, because I thought that, well, it'd be better received on the West Coast,
Oh,
well, these people are really open-minded, and, and it's really out there, so I'm just going to, make life easy on myself.
mm,
But the book that I really wanted to, so the book that I wrote is not the book I really wanted to write. Like, I just wanted to jump right in and talk about the higher realms and everything that's up there and how it's different from here and the
yeah,
different frequencies everything lives on, and
yeah,
all of that. And I thought, well, if I do that, then people might ask, well, how do you know? How do you know this? So instead, I wrote the book, How Did I Get to That? Just to show people that anybody can get there. Anybody can have those experiences if they do the right things. And so I use myself as an example again, that how did I get to that? Like, when I started meditating, how did I do it? How did it happen to me? What was my life like? And I went through a pretty scary time for myself. I was going through huge changes.
mm,
And I was guided every step of the way, and I was given a job to do. And it was just, so I had to use that as an example so that people would see that, oh, I'm just a regular person.
Yeah.
And
So tell us, if you don't mind, I mean, and as long as it's not too personal, about those hard times and how that attitude helped you through it, or what happened.
uh, well, for instance, at one time I had rheumatoid arthritis, and it's an incurable disease. It's
Mm,
when your immune system attacks your body.
mm,
And I feel like, well, it's relevant to this book too, because everything's relevant. I mean,
yeah.
but at any rate, I started meditating, and after maybe 2, 3 years, it went away. And I had a rheumatologist,
Mm,
that I was working with, and I mean, I got all the tests, I got all that stuff, and
mm.
it just over time it went away,
Wow.
and so that would be an example on how that was
Mm,
affecting my life. I was going through a lot of changes.
yeah.
Um, I had changed careers. I had left my husband. I was
Mm,
starting over. I knew I had to make a change. I didn't know where I was going or what was going to happen, and all of that. But I just had this gut feeling, like I just knew that I have to do this. And it's
yeah.
not going to be easy, but I got to do it.
Yeah. Well,
And I think everybody's been through periods like that where they feel like they just have to do something. It's
yes. Yes. I know that in our own situation, we have found ourselves in some way leaving. I mean, I don't mean to go religious with this in any way, shape, or form, but like leaving something up to God, especially when you feel overwhelmed or feel that you cannot do anything more. And there's been several situations like that in our lives. And I mean, I can give some simple examples. Like, I remember when I was just leaving school, and you know how most kids, they would have some idea of what it is that they want to do with their lives. I want to be a train driver or a pilot or a whatever, right? Me, when I left school, I didn't have no idea. I absolutely had no idea. And I remember saying at the time, and I don't know whether it was stupidity or wisdom, but I said to myself, I'll just let God show me, right? And I
yeah,
remember at that time, I was a lifeguard on a beach on the west coast of Ireland. And of course, in the winter time, come September, it gets too cold. So the lifeguard hut shuts down. And I had left school in that June and shutting down the lifeguard's hut. And I was coming a lift home at the time. And I still was saying, what am I going to do? I had no idea. I had no idea. And next thing, this car stopped. And oh my God, I remember it so clearly to this day. It was an old farmer. He had sheep in the back of the car, believe it or not. This was crazy. And the front seat had another sheep in it. And I sat behind him, the driver. And it was the only, I mean, it was a lift home, so I took it. But on the floor, on a dirty, dirty newspaper on the floor, was this advertisement that said offshore oil and gas technology course starting Monday. And I tore that out and I called and went and visited and got it. Now, from that, I went around the world. I ended up going to the North Sea, drilling for oil and gas. I went to Libya, Malta, Pakistan, India, Greece. I mean, I was all over the place. Egypt, spent 6 years in Egypt. As a result of that little prayer, I suppose you could call it, God, show me, like, what's next. Synchronicities, little coincidences like that. And I mean, little things like that have happened to us all the time. I remember too, one time we were living, Aingeal Rose and I, in California, and we were looking for a house and we searched everywhere. Oh my God, we went and looked online and offline and called and visited realtors, and we were just hitting a brick wall. And then Aingeal Rose just threw her hands up and said, let God decide, right? The very next day, this woman said, hey, I got a place. Come on over and see it. And we lived there for a year. And it would happen so smoothly, so easily. It's like when we give up the effort, do you know what I mean? And just let So I don't know if that's relevant to what you're saying, but it feels like it might be similar to your experiences.
Yeah, it's like when I moved out here. I moved here from Ottawa, Ontario, and I I have dual citizenship, so I can do that. And
Good
so
for
I had
you.
a van because I'd been doing stained glass. So I had a van, and it was full of stuff, and I put everything I needed uh, that would last me through the fall, and I had my stained glass stuff and everything, and so I hit the road, and I knew one person here in Bellingham. And so I didn't have a job or a place to stay, but I just, you know, I'm the one that's comfortable with change and a high degree of uncertainty. So, so I took off and got to the border, and over at the border they asked me, so where are you going? And I said, oh, I'm going to Bellingham, and I'm going to visit some friends, which is true. And so I told him, I'm on vacation.
Mm.
Because Canadians do that.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
so, because I didn't know, I didn't want them to ask me, so where are you going to stay and what are you going to be doing? Because I don't know. So I
yeah,
said, oh, I'm on vacation. So
yeah.
she looked at everything on her screen and looked at my passport and looked at everything and everything. And she said, well, if I open the door, is everything going to fall out of your van? And I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And so finally she just let me go through. And I drove across the country, and I had perfect weather the whole time. I think I had a light sprinkle. I had perfect weather all the way.
Mm.
And then my friend put up something on Facebook, and it said, oh, I have a friend moving down here, and she's going to need a place to stay,
Mm.
for a short time, for a while.
Mm.
And so this lady on Facebook put her hand up, and she says, well, I have some exchange students, but they're getting ready to leave. And if she gets here after they're gone, she can stay for a short while because they've
Mm.
been here for a year.
Mm.
Well, I arrived the afternoon that they left that morning. And I started looking for a place to stay. And after a few days, she said, you know, Paula, we get along so well. How would you like to stay?
Wow.
And I lived with her for the next 8 years.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
And then, of course, then I went to an employment agency and got a job right away through a temp agency because
Yeah.
I have a lot of skills, so I knew I could probably get something, and everything was taken care of.
That's amazing. I do genuinely believe that when we do allow ourselves to create and manifest without having to feel that we have to manipulate and force and push, that it happens, and it'll happen for the highest, what we call the highest heroic outcome. That's what we
Yes.
like. Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. All right. Well, before we close, I'm curious about your concept of an emotional palette. What is that?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Tell us about that.
I came up with that.
Yeah.
Well, most people, the way they live their life, the way they react to their life, they have maybe 4 or 5 different emotions that they express, if that many. Either they're happy, they're sad, they're angry, or whatever their emotion is. It's a habit, and they pretty much have it limited to probably 4 or 5 at the very most. But I believe that you have to allow your heart to be open and to be open to experiencing and feeling everything.
Mm.
And when you do that, then your emotional palette can feel so many nuances of your whole life experience.
Mm.
And I believe that I I learned that through meditation, is that the more that you open your heart and that you're open to experiencing the world, and that you let go of all your stuff, you work through it and let it go, you're gonna experience so much more, and you're gonna sense a lot of the nuances in life. And in meditation, you're going to sense all those other nuances too.
Wow, gosh. Well, now, so we need to expand our emotional palette.
Yes.
Yeah, nice one, nice one. Okay, so to close, Paula, tell us, how do people get your book, and how do they get in touch with you if they wanted to connect with you?
They can get my book on Amazon, and it looks like this.
Okay.
And my email address, I just use my regular email. I have a website, but you can just email me. It's Paula Forget, and the number 9 at gmail.com.
Okay, that's easy. That's easy. Well, I sincerely feel that your message will impact a lot of people, because certainly when I heard about it first, I thought I was compelled to talk to you more about it. Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. I love how it's just an expansion of consciousness to think in those terms. So let me say, on behalf of Aingeal Rose and myself, I really appreciate you coming on and telling us about your book. What if you lived 300 years? How to live with resilience in changing times, I think is marvelous. And we would encourage people to get it on Amazon. Okay, Paula, super to meet you, super to talk to you. Keep going, keep writing, keep publishing, and we'd love to speak with you again at some stage about what you're doing. All right.
Okay, thank you so much.
Take care. You're very welcome.
You have been listening to Aingeal Rose and Ahonu on World of Empowerment Radio, your station for practical spirituality in a changing world.